Hannah stood at the entrance of shaft 13, clutching her cart, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Everyone in the mine knew this shaft was sealed. Everyone knew it was dangerous. Yet tonight, someone had ordered her down anyway. From the darkness ahead, a man stepped forward, clean boots, calm eyes, no coal dust on his hands. "You're late," he said. That was when Hannah understood. This wasn't a mistake, it was a trap. Deep in the shadows behind her, unseen by everyone else, a former Navy SEAL watched. He had waited for weeks. He had obeyed every order. He had swallowed every instinct to act. But when the man reached for her arm, the line was crossed. A low growl echoed through the tunnel.
"You're coming with me!"
A German shepherd surged out of the darkness, placing himself between Hannah and the threat. And a quiet voice followed, steady and unafraid. Rain drifted low over the Appalachian hills that morning, the kind of gray rain that didn't fall so much as settle. The town of Black Hollow, West Virginia, lay pressed between forested ridges and the mouth of an aging coal mine, its streets narrow, its buildings weathered, its people accustomed to silence. The air smelled of wet earth and metal, and everything, cars, fences, rooftops, carried a faint, permanent dusting of black. Coal dust never really left this place. It lingered the way memory did. Caleb Turner arrived just before sunrise, his pickup easing into the gravel lot outside the mine office without drawing attention. He stepped out slowly, moving like a man who had learned long ago not to rush unless necessary. Caleb was 40, tall without being imposing, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped, as if the years had taught him to make himself smaller. His hair was dark brown, cut close to the scalp, already threaded with gray. A heavy beard shadowed his jaw, rough and uneven, giving his face a permanently tired look. His eyes were the most noticeable thing about him, gray, steady, observant, eyes that missed very little and revealed even less. He wore the uniform of his cover well, a faded gray safety jacket with reflective strips dulled by use, a flannel shirt beneath it, thick work pants stained at the knees, and steel-toe boots scuffed beyond any hope of polish. Slung over one shoulder was a canvas bag holding gas meters, inspection tags, and notebooks. On paper, Caleb Turner was an independent mine safety inspector contracted to assess structural integrity and air quality. To anyone who asked, he had spent years doing this kind of work across the region. No one asked much beyond that. In Black Hollow, people learned early not to pry. Behind him jumped down Iron. The German shepherd landed lightly despite his size, muscles coiling and releasing with controlled ease. Iron was large, powerfully built, with a thick black and tan coat already dusted with coal residue from earlier work sites. His muzzle was graying slightly, marking him as no longer young, 7 years old, but his posture remained alert, disciplined. A thin scar split the edge of his left ear, a souvenir from a life before this one. His eyes were a deep amber, intelligent and constantly scanning, missing nothing. To the mine, Iron was officially registered as a safety support animal trained to assist in gas detection and tunnel assessment. To Caleb, he was something far more personal, a former working dog from another life, one built on trust earned under fire. Iron stayed close to Caleb's left side, not crowding him, just present. He didn't bark. He rarely did. Noise was a liability. Inside the mine office, the lights hummed weakly. A woman stood behind the counter, flipping through a clipboard. Her name was Sarah Whitcomb, mid-40s, tall and thin, her posture rigid with long habit rather than confidence. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight bun streaked with gray, her face sharp with angles that suggested she'd lost weight and never quite regained it. Sarah wore plain slacks and a sweater that had been mended at the elbow, practical and unremarkable. She had grown up in Black Hollow, married a miner at 20, buried him at 32 after a cave-in that was ruled unavoidable. Since then, she'd developed a careful politeness, a way of keeping everyone at arm's length without seeming cold. She looked up as Caleb entered, eyes flicking briefly to iron before settling on Caleb's badge. "Morning," she said, voice neutral. "You're early." "Habit," Caleb replied. His voice was low, even, carrying no accent that placed him clearly anywhere. "Turner, safety inspection." She checked the clipboard, nodded. "You're on the schedule. Mine supervisor's down below already. Shaft access is open. Weather's making the readings unstable today." Caleb gave a small nod. That's when problems show themselves. Sarah hesitated, then offered a faint, humorless smile. "You sound like you've done this before." "Once or twice," Caleb said. She signed his access form, slid it across the counter. "Watch yourself down there. This place doesn't forgive mistakes." "It never does," he replied. As Caleb turned toward the locker area, Iron followed without prompting. Sarah watched them go, her gaze lingering just a second longer on the dog. Animals didn't last long around the mines unless they were trained or lucky. Iron looked like neither. He looked like something forged. The elevator cage rattled as it descended, metal screaming softly against old rails. Caleb clipped his helmet light into place, checked his gas monitor, and made a note of the initial readings. Oxygen levels acceptable. Methane low but fluctuating. He wrote neatly, efficiently, his handwriting disciplined, almost military. He did not write down the things that mattered most yet, the subtle inconsistencies, the vibrations underfoot that didn't match the official schematics. Those stayed in his head. Down in the main tunnel, miners moved past him with tired nods, faces streaked with black, eyes dulled by repetition. They were men of varying ages, most lean, some already bent despite their years. Few spoke, fewer still looked directly at him. Safety inspectors were tolerated, not trusted. They came and went. The mine remained. Caleb moved methodically, checking support beams, measuring airflow, pausing often as if double-checking numbers. In truth, he was listening to the rhythm of machinery, to footsteps echoing where they shouldn't, to the subtle hum beneath the noise that spoke of spaces not meant to exist. Iron mirrored him, stopping when he stopped, head tilting slightly, when unfamiliar scents drifted through the stale air. Coal dust coated everything. It settled into hair, skin, fabric, lungs. Down here, it erased differences. Rich or poor, guilty or innocent, everyone looked the same shade of black. That was why places like this were useful. That was why Caleb was here. No one down here knew that before he ever carried a gas meter, Caleb Turner had carried a rifle. No one knew he had once moved through deserts and cities half a world away, trained to observe without being observed, to endure discomfort without complaint. The CIA had not made him into this man. They had found him after the uniform came off, after the structure disappeared, after the silence became too loud. They had offered him something that looked like purpose and felt like penance. A man brushed past him, muttering an apology. Caleb stepped aside, making room. Iron shifted just enough to block a narrow offshoot tunnel sitting calmly in the center of the path. The miner frowned, then chose another route without comment. It happened quickly, naturally. No confrontation, no explanation, just redirection. Caleb marked another measurement and straightened, the dust settling back onto his shoulders. Above them, the town carried on, unaware of what lay beneath its feet. Beneath the black dust, truth waited. It always did. By mid-morning, the rain had thinned to a gray mist that clung to the hills like breath held too long. Inside the mine, time flattened. Shifts blurred together beneath the hum of machinery and the slow scrape of coal against steel. Caleb Turner had been underground for hours, moving from tunnel to tunnel, his notebook filling with numbers that told one story and his instincts whispering another. Iron remained close, his presence steady, his movements economical, his ears tracking every sound that did not belong. The delivery came later than usual. Hannah Brooks appeared at the edge of the main shaft, pushing a dented metal cart stacked with water jugs, first aid kits, and small crates of supplies. She was 29, slight in build, with narrow shoulders that made the cart look heavier than it already was. Her brown hair was tied back in a low ponytail that never quite held, loose strands slipping free to frame a face too gentle for a place like this. Coal dust already marked her jeans and the cuffs of her jacket, a faded blue thing that had once belonged to her father. Her eyes were hazel, alert but cautious, the eyes of someone who had learned to watch moods as carefully as schedules. Hannah had grown up in Black Hollow. She knew the mine the way other people knew churches. Her father had worked these tunnels for 30 years before his heart began to fail. Since then, she had taken whatever work she could find to keep him supplied with medication and the lights on at home. She spoke softly to everyone, apologized even when nothing was her fault, and carried herself with a politeness that came from long habit rather than weakness. Most days she was invisible enough to be tolerated. Today she wasn't careful enough. One of the cart wheels caught on a ridge of uneven stone as she turned into the loading area. The cart lurched, a crate tipped, the sound echoed sharply as metal struck rock. Water jugs rolled. A small white bottle skidded across the blackened floor and cracked open, pills scattering like bone fragments against coal dust. The mine manager was already there. Thomas Reed stood near the supply ledger, tall and thick through the chest, his build heavy rather than strong. He was in his early 50s, his hair thinning and combed back with deliberate care. His face was broad, ruddy, always flushed as if anger lived just beneath the skin. Reed wore a clean, hard hat and a jacket that never seemed to collect dust the way everyone else's did. He had never worked the tunnels long enough to earn it. Years ago, a machinery accident that left a younger man injured had been quietly blamed on equipment failure. Reed had signed the report. Since then, he carried himself like someone who believed authority could keep consequences away. "What the hell is this?" he said, his voice carrying easily over the noise. He did not shout. He didn't need to. "I'm sorry," Hannah said quickly, dropping to her knees. Her hand shook as she reached for the pills. "The wheel caught. I'll clean it up." Reed stepped closer. His boot came down on the broken bottle, grinding it lightly into the stone. Plastic crumpled. Pills cracked beneath the sole. "For people like you," he said, calm and precise, "this is where you learn to be careful." A few miners paused, then looked away. No one spoke. No one moved to help. The mine had taught them what interference cost. Caleb saw everything. He stood several yards back, gas meter in hand, body angled slightly away as if absorbed in his readings. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Every instinct he had honed over decades urged him forward. End it. Stop it. He did neither. The rules of the work pressed heavier than the coal above them. Exposure too soon meant losing the entire operation, losing more than one person in the long run. Iron felt the change before Caleb moved at all. The dog stepped forward and sat down squarely in the narrow path between Reed and the rest of the tunnel, his broad body blocking easy passage. He did not bare his teeth. He did not growl. He simply occupied space, calm and immovable. The effect was immediate. Reed frowned, irritation flickering across his face. He took a step, then another, realized the path was blocked, and clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Get your animal out of the way!" Reed snapped. Caleb looked up at last. He did not raise his voice. "Restricted airflow here," he said evenly. "We need to clear this section until readings stabilize." He held up the meter. Numbers blinked. They were not false, not entirely. Reed hesitated, the smallest pause, but it was there. He glanced at the device, then at the miners watching from a distance. Authority was most effective when it appeared unquestioned. Reed took his foot off the bottle, stepped back, waved a dismissive hand. "Clean it up," he said to Hannah, already turning away, "and don't make me repeat myself." Hannah gathered the remaining pills with care, her fingers blackened with dust. She did not cry. She had learned early that tears changed nothing. When she finished, she held the crushed bottle in both hands, unsure what to do next. Caleb knelt beside her. Up close, his hands looked as worn as the mine itself, scarred and steady. He picked up a piece of the cracked plastic, then another, assembling the bottle as best he could. He did it slowly, deliberately, as if this small act deserved his full attention. Iron shifted to sit beside him, close enough that Hannah could feel the warmth of his body through her jacket. "You dropped this," Caleb said quietly, holding out the makeshift container. Hannah looked up at him, startled. Her eyes flicked to Iron, then back to Caleb's face. For a moment, she looked like she might speak, and then thought better of it. "Thank you," she said instead, her voice barely audible over the machinery. "It's my father's. He needs it." Caleb nodded once. No promises, no reassurances, just acknowledgement. From across the loading area, Sarah Whitcomb watched the exchange. She had come down to deliver paperwork and stopped when she saw Reed's posture, the tension in the room. Sarah stood straight, hands clasped at her waist, her expression carefully neutral. She had learned to read situations the way others read weather. This one carried danger. She noticed the way Reed's jaw tightened as he passed her, the way his eyes lingered on the dog longer than necessary. Hannah pushed the cart away once the path cleared, her shoulders tight, her steps measured. As she passed Sarah, their eyes met briefly. Sarah gave a small nod, something close to solidarity. It was the most she could offer without inviting trouble. Caleb rose and resumed his inspection as if nothing had happened. Iron followed. The mind swallowed the moment whole, burying it beneath routine and noise. But Hannah felt it linger. As she made her rounds, the weight of the crushed bottle pressed against her palm through the fabric of her jacket. Someone had seen her. Someone had acted without demanding gratitude or recognition. In Black Hollow, that was rare enough to feel dangerous. By the time the shift bell rang, coal dust coated everything again. The mine returned to its rhythm. And beneath it all, something small had shifted, unnoticed by most, but not by the man who was very good at noticing. Night settled over Black Hollow like a held breath. By the time the last shift cleared the main shaft, the rain had stopped, leaving the hills slick and the air sharp with cold. The mine took on a different character after dark. The noise thinned. Footsteps carried farther. Shadows lengthened and stitched themselves together in places that daylight never reached. Caleb Turner signed back in under the pretext of a follow-up inspection, his name one more line on a clipboard already crowded with forgotten entries. Iron padded beside him, nails clicking softly against concrete. His body relaxed, but his attention narrowed, as if the dark sharpened him. Caleb moved deeper than he had during the day, choosing routes that were supposed to dead-end. His lamp swept across rock faces, scarred by decades of work. Timber supports darkened with age, warning signs bleached nearly white. He checked airflow, noted pressure changes, logged temperatures. On paper, everything aligned. Underfoot, it did not. The ground vibrated differently here, a subtle hum beneath the surface noise, a suggestion of space where none should be. He paused, palm resting briefly against the rock. The stone felt colder than it should. Iron stopped and lifted his head. His ears angled forward, his nostrils flared. He moved a step to the left, then another, pulling gently against the leash, before sitting and staring at a narrow seam between two support beams. The smell reached Caleb a second later, faint but unmistakable. Oil, cold metal, something chemical that did not belong in a coal seam. Beneath it all, a sharper note, acrid and wrong, the residue of explosives long past their intended use. Caleb noted the location without writing it down. He stepped back, adjusted his light, and moved on as if nothing had registered. That was the work now. See everything. Record selectively. Wait. At the surface office, a single lamp still burned. Sarah Whitcomb sat alone at her desk, shoulders slightly hunched, reading glasses perched low on her nose. The light carved shadows into the lines of her face, emphasizing the fatigue she carried without complaint. She had stayed late to reconcile reports, a task she took personally after years of watching small inaccuracies turn into big tragedies. When Caleb entered, she looked up, surprise flickering across her expression. "Didn't think anyone else would be down there tonight," she said. "Follow-up readings," Caleb replied. He removed his helmet, setting it carefully on the counter. Iron lay down at his feet, eyes half-lidded, but alert. Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. Storm always shakes things loose. She hesitated, fingers tightening around her pen. "You see Reed today?" "Briefly." Her mouth thinned. "He's been jumpy, more than usual." Caleb offered nothing in response. Silence often encouraged people to fill it themselves. Sarah sighed and leaned back in her chair. "There are places in that mind that don't make sense," she said quietly, as if the walls might listen. "There always have been." Before Caleb could ask more, the door opened again. The man who entered moved with the careful stiffness of someone unused to enclosed spaces. He was older, mid-60s perhaps, tall but bent slightly at the shoulders, his frame thinned by years of labor and a recent absence of it. His name was Earl Whitaker, though few still spoke it aloud. His gray hair hung long and unkempt beneath a battered cap. His beard yellowed with age and tobacco. Earl's eyes were pale blue and restless, darting from Sarah to Caleb to Iron with equal caution. "I heard you were back," Earl said, voice rough as gravel. Sarah straightened. "Earl, you shouldn't be here." He waved her off. "Didn't come for trouble. Came because there's still some of us who remember what's buried." Earl had been a miner once, 38 years underground before his lungs gave out. A roof collapse 10 years earlier had taken 2 men and nearly taken him. The official report cited natural shifting. Earl had signed it with a shaking hand, then quit a month later. Since then, he had lived on the edge of town, collecting scrap, watching trucks move in and out of the mine long after legal hours. His gaze settled on Caleb. "You're the inspector," he said. "The one with the dog." Caleb inclined his head slightly. Earl reached into his coat and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, edges worn soft. "You won't find this on any map," he said, extending it. "But it's there. Or it was." Caleb took the paper. It was a hand-drawn sketch of tunnels branching where no branches should exist, lines layered over each other, annotated with dates and initials. The ink had faded, but the intent remained clear. Earl watched Caleb's face closely, searching for recognition or dismissal. "They told us it was reinforcement work," Earl continued. "Extra shafts to stabilize pressure. But the trucks started coming at night, not coal trucks, no dust, no markings." "What happened next?" Caleb asked. Earl's jaw tightened. "I asked questions. Then they moved me. Then the cave-in happened." He glanced at Sarah, guilt flickering briefly across his features. "Some of us live long enough to regret staying quiet." Sarah swallowed. She had been a junior clerk then, the one who filed the paperwork after the accident. The memory had hardened her in ways few people noticed. Earl nodded toward Iron. "That dog knows," he said. "They always do." Iron lifted his head at the sound of his name, tail thumping once against the floor. Caleb folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket. "You should go," he said to Earl, voice calm. "Tonight." Earl hesitated, then nodded. "I already am." He left as quietly as he'd come. Sarah stared at the closed door, her hands trembling slightly. "They'll notice," she said. "If he talked to you." "They already noticed," Caleb replied. The next morning, Earl Whitaker did not show up at the diner where he took his coffee. By noon, people were saying he'd gone to stay with family. By evening, no one was saying his name at all. Caleb returned to the mine that night. He stood at the seam iron had marked and listened to the silence beneath the rock. Somewhere beyond it, engines hummed. Somewhere beyond it, the mine kept secrets that were never meant to see daylight. Iron pressed closer to his leg, the low vibration of warning running through him. Caleb rested a hand briefly on the dog's head, grounding himself. He angled toward the receiving area under the pretense of a routine inspection. Pallets of supplies waited beneath a corrugated awning, plastic sheeting snapping lightly in the breeze. The delivery schedule was posted on a warped board near the loading dock. Caleb scanned it with practiced casualness, then reached into his jacket pocket and felt the firm shape of the bottle he had reconstructed, the pills sealed inside with tape and care. He had cleaned each one, wiped away coal dust, counted what remained. It was not much. It was enough. Hannah Brooks arrived a few minutes later, pushing the same dented cart, her movements careful, shoulders squared, as if bracing for impact. She looked more tired than the day before, the shadows under her eyes darker, her ponytail pulled tighter. She wore the blue jacket again, sleeves rolled to the wrist, hands already smudged black. Her posture had changed since the incident. Not weaker, more guarded. She kept her gaze level now, alert to every shift in tone around her. Caleb waited until the area cleared, then stepped forward. He did not call her name. He did not rush. He held up his clipboard, the universal shield of authority. "Need to check the floor integrity here," he said evenly. "Mind pausing a moment?" Hannah nodded and stepped back without argument. Her eyes flicked to iron, then to Caleb's face. Recognition passed between them, brief and unspoken. Caleb crouched as if examining a hairline crack near the dock edge. Iron sat beside him, broad back to the open space, blocking sight lines without appearing to do so. Caleb reached into his jacket and placed the bottle on the low concrete lip between them, sliding it toward her without looking directly at her. "Found this," he said. "I seal should hold for now." Hannah stared at the bottle as if it might vanish. She picked it up slowly, fingers closing around it. Her breath caught, then steadied. "You didn't have to," she said. "I did," Caleb replied, already straightening. No emphasis, no invitation. For a moment she looked like she might ask something else. Her eyes searched his face, trying to find the edges of him. There were none she could see, only calm and something held far behind it. "Thank you," she said again, quieter this time. Caleb nodded once and returned to his clipboard. The exchange lasted seconds. It was enough. From the office window above the yard, Thomas Reed watched. Reed stood with his arms crossed, jacket open despite the chill, his gaze fixed on the loading area below. He had noticed the inspector before. Too quiet, too thorough. And now, this. He leaned closer to the glass, irritation tightening his mouth. Reed trusted systems when they served him. Cameras, logs, routines. They kept things orderly. They kept questions manageable. He turned to the monitor bank along the wall. The screens showed grainy feeds from around the yard, time stamped and silent. Reed rewound the footage slightly, watched the inspector kneel, the dog sit, the woman receive something small and white. Nothing overt, nothing actionable, but enough. Reed made a note, not on paper, in his head. Inside the office, Sarah Whitcomb sat at her desk, fingers laced together, eyes on her screen, but mind elsewhere. She had seen Caleb and Hannah from a distance, recognized the tension in Hannah's shoulders easing by a fraction. Sarah understood small mercies. She also understood what they cost in places like this. Years ago, she had learned that doing nothing could be just as dangerous as doing the wrong thing. Since then, she had chosen precision. She followed rules closely. She watched carefully. She kept records. It was the only way she knew to stay useful. A soft chime sounded on her computer. A system alert. Minor anomaly. Camera 3 had logged an irregular dwell time. Inspector paused longer than protocol suggested. Sarah frowned, pulled up the timestamp. She hesitated, then marked the alert as reviewed. No escalation. Not yet. Down below, Caleb moved on to the next inspection point. Iron rose and followed. Hannah pushed her cart toward the main shaft, the bottle tucked safely into her pocket. As she passed the threshold, she glanced back once. Caleb did not look up. The distance between them remained intact, deliberate, and necessary. The rest of the shift passed without incident, too quietly. By late afternoon, whispers traveled faster than carts. The inspector was thorough. The dog was trained. The manager was watching. Nothing said outright. Everything understood. As dusk settled, the yard lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the gravel. Caleb finished his reports at a standing table near the lockers, his handwriting neat, unremarkable. Iron lay at his feet, eyes half closed, listening. When Caleb signed out, Reed was waiting near the exit, his smile thin and practiced. "Long day," Reed said. "Usually is," Caleb replied. Reed nodded toward Iron. "That dog of yours gets around." "Part of the job," Caleb said. Reed's eyes lingered, then slid away. "Just remember," he said lightly, "we do things by the book here." Caleb met his gaze, expression unreadable. "So do I." They parted without further exchange. Reed watched Caleb leave, his mind already turning over possibilities. A man who followed the book too closely could be just as dangerous as one who ignored it. The pressure showed itself first in small changes, the kind most people ignored, because ignoring them made the workday easier. Hannah Brooks noticed it before anyone else. Her delivery schedule shifted without explanation, her name penciled into roots that descended deeper into the mine than she had ever been sent before. The carts were heavier there, the air thicker, the ceiling lower. She felt it in her chest when she walked, the faint ache that came from breathing dust too long, and in the way the lights flickered more often, as if the mine itself were tired of holding itself together. Hannah adjusted the way she moved. She checked straps twice. She kept her headlamp clean. She spoke less and listened more. People down deep did not linger on pleasantries. They nodded, took supplies, turned away. The deeper levels carried a different mood, one shaped by risk rather than routine. Hannah had learned early that fear did not mean weakness. It meant awareness. She carried it carefully, like everything else she carried. Caleb Turner noticed the change immediately. He was reviewing structural supports near a junction that fed into 3 separate shafts when he saw Hannah pass below, her cart guided carefully over uneven ground. The route marker on her clipboard caught his eye. That path was unnecessary, redundant. He logged the observation mentally, then forced himself to look away. Patterns mattered. Reactions did too. He could not afford to show either too openly. Above ground, Thomas Reed made a point of being visible. Reed's presence had shifted from casual oversight to deliberate scrutiny. He appeared near inspection sites more often now, his clean jacket increasingly out of place among the dust. He asked questions that did not need answers, lingered just long enough to unsettle. His eyes followed Iron with open irritation, his mouth tightening whenever the dog moved ahead of Caleb without command. "That animal certified?" Reed asked one afternoon, standing too close. "Yes," Caleb replied, handing over the documentation without hesitation. Reed scanned the page, then another. "He's trained for detection work." "Among other things." Reed looked up. "Other things?" "Stability assessment, alert response." Reed grunted. "Seems excessive." Caleb met his gaze. "So does collapse." Reed said nothing, but the silence lingered longer than necessary. When he finally walked away, his shoulders were tense, his steps sharper. He did not like variables he could not control. Sarah Whitcomb felt the strain from her desk. She had begun staying later again, the way she had after the accident years ago. Back then, she had been younger, still believing paperwork could protect people if done correctly. Now she knew better, but habits were hard to break. She noticed the changes in scheduling, the rerouting of deliveries, the way certain reports were returned for revision without explanation. She noticed the increase in security logs requested by management, the quiet pressure to keep discrepancies internal. One evening, she found herself standing at the window, watching Hannah disappear into a lower access shaft. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the glass, thinner than she remembered, eyes sharper. She remembered signing the report that ended Earl Whitaker's career. She remembered telling herself it wasn't her fault. The memory sat heavy now. Down below, Iron slowed as they approached one of the deeper tunnels. His hackles lifted slightly, not enough to draw attention, just enough to signal unease. The smell was stronger here. Oil, metal. The faint chemical edge that Caleb had learned to associate with sealed crates and hidden compartments. He marked the location, adjusted his readings, and moved on. That night, away from the mine, Caleb sat in his truck with the engine off, dashboard dark. Iron lay across the back seat, head lifted, watching him. Caleb pulled out a phone that looked old and unremarkable, its casing scuffed, its screen dim. He typed slowly, choosing words with care. Locations, timings, patterns. He sent nothing that could not stand alone if intercepted. The response came minutes later, text only, precise and impersonal. Continue observation. Do not engage. Intervention authorized only in event of immediate threat to civilian life. Caleb read it twice, then once more. The directive carried weight, not because of what it allowed, but because of what it forbade. He closed his eyes briefly, then put the phone away. Iron shifted, sensing the change. Caleb reached back and rested a hand against the dog's shoulder, grounding himself in the solid warmth there. The financial pressure surfaced next. It came not from the mine, but from beyond it, a series of transactions flagged through channels Caleb did not directly access. He received the summary through the same secure means, stripped of context but heavy with implication. Shell companies, equipment leases paid in cash equivalents, funds routed through intermediaries that had no business near coal. The numbers converged on Black Hollow with a consistency that erased coincidence. Someone was using the mine for more than extraction. The next day, Hannah was sent down again, this time to a level where the walls wept moisture and the lights buzzed constantly. She paused at the entrance, swallowing hard, then pushed forward. She did not see Caleb watching from above, his posture still, his face unreadable. She did see Iron's ears flick toward her, the dog's attention tracking her progress until she vanished into the dark. Reed watched, too, from the opposite side of the yard, his hands tucked into his pockets. He followed Hannah's path with his eyes, then turned them back on Caleb. Something in his expression shifted, a calculation settling into place. The rain arrived hard and without patience, hammering the metal roofs of Black Hollow until the town seemed to shrink beneath it. By nightfall, runoff carved thin rivers through the gravel yard, carrying coal dust toward the drains in inky streams. Inside the mine, the sound became something else entirely, a distant roar filtered through layers of rock. Storm nights always changed the rules. They masked movement, they swallowed noise, they made bad decisions easier to hide. Hannah Brooks received the order near the end of her shift. It was written plainly on a clipped sheet, no explanation offered, no signatures beyond the supervisor's initials. Deliver to Shaft 13. She stared at the words longer than necessary, her pulse quickening. Shaft 13 had been sealed years ago after structural instability. Everyone knew that. Everyone pretended not to. Hannah was not reckless. She was careful by nature, shaped that way by a father who taught her to read warning signs the way other people read maps. She considered pushing back. She considered asking Sarah. Then she remembered the way routes had been reassigned lately, how resistance drew attention, how attention carried weight she could not afford. She tightened the straps on her cart and moved. Caleb Turner saw the order the moment it left the office. He stood near a wall-mounted board, reviewing inspection tags when the clerk pinned the sheet into place. Caleb did not react. He stepped closer as if checking dates, then saw the route marker. 13. His jaw set. The sealed shaft aligned too neatly with the financial data, with Earl's map, with the smells Iron had flagged. A trap did not have to be elaborate to be effective. It only had to be isolated. Caleb waited until Hannah disappeared down the main corridor. Then he turned away from the board and took a side passage that was not meant for carts, its entrance half hidden behind stacked timbers. He adjusted his helmet light to its lowest setting and loosened Iron's leash. The dog moved ahead immediately, body low, pace deliberate. The air grew heavier with every step, damp and metallic, tinged with oil and something sharper beneath it. Shaft 13 announced itself with silence. The tunnel widened abruptly, the walls smoothed by older reinforcement work, the ceiling higher than the rest of the mine. A single overhead light flickered near the entrance, casting uneven shadows that danced with the movement of rainwater dripping from above. Hannah stopped at the threshold, the cart rattling softly as it settled. She felt the wrongness before she understood it. The space smelled different, cleaner, touched too recently. A man stepped out from behind a stack of crates. He was tall and lean, late 30s perhaps, with dark hair cut short and a face too composed for this place. His jacket was clean, his boots unscuffed. He carried himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed, shoulders back, chin level. His eyes were cold, assessing, and they lingered on Hannah with clinical interest. "You're late," he said. "I just got the order," Hannah replied, keeping her voice steady. She did not move closer. She did not move back. "That's fine," he said. "Leave it there." She hesitated. "I need a signature." The man smiled thinly. "You won't." Hannah's heart hammered. She backed the cart a fraction, fingers tightening around the handle. "I should go." He took a step toward her. "You should listen." Outside the shaft, Iron froze. His body went rigid, ears forward, tail low. The smell was unmistakable now. Gun oil, sweat, fear. He glanced back once, meeting Caleb's eyes, then looked forward again, silent and intent. Caleb closed the distance without haste. He positioned himself at the edge of the light spill, keeping the darkness between him and the figures ahead. He saw Hannah's posture change, saw the way she shifted her weight, preparing to run without knowing where. He counted steps. He marked exits. He waited until the moment could no longer be misread. The man reached for Hannah's arm. Caleb moved. He stepped into the light, voice cutting cleanly through the space. "Step away from her." The man turned, surprise flashing briefly across his face before calculation replaced it. His hand dropped from Hannah's sleeve. "This doesn't concern you," he said. "It does now," Caleb replied. Iron surged forward at the same time, not lunging, not barking, simply placing himself between Hannah and the man, broad chest squared, eyes locked. The dog's presence changed the equation instantly. The man's gaze flicked down, then back up, tension tightening his jaw. "You don't want to do this," he said. Caleb kept his hands visible, empty. "Neither do you." The man shifted his stance. Somewhere behind him, metal scraped softly. Crates, hidden space, evidence. Rain thundered above them, masking the sound of approaching footsteps in distant tunnels. Caleb took advantage of it. He stepped closer, just enough to draw focus, just enough to force the man's attention away from Hannah. "Walk away," Caleb said. "Now." The man hesitated, then smiled again, sharper this time. "You think you're in control?" Caleb answered by moving. He closed the gap with precise speed, redirecting the man's reach, twisting his wrist, forcing him back against the crate stack. Iron pressed forward, a solid wall, teeth bared just enough to be understood. The man struggled briefly, then stopped. The fight left him as quickly as it had come. He had not expected resistance. Not here. Caleb released him and stepped back. "Leave," he said, "while you can." The man straightened his jacket, eyes burning with resentment. "This isn't over." "It is for tonight," Caleb replied. The man retreated into the shadows beyond the crates, footsteps fading into the maze of tunnels. Caleb waited until the silence settled again before turning to Hannah. She stood frozen, breath shallow, eyes wide. Her hands shook now that the moment had passed. "You're safe," Caleb said quietly. She swallowed. "You followed me?" "Yes." "Why?" Caleb met her gaze. He did not lie. "Because it wasn't right." She nodded slowly, understanding without understanding everything. Iron stepped closer to her, tail swaying once, grounding her with his presence. Caleb reached into his pocket and took out his phone. He photographed the crates, the scuffed floor, the altered supports. He recorded the time, the location, the sound still echoing faintly. Evidence gathered, intact. Enough. He guided Hannah back toward the main corridor, staying behind her, Iron leading the way. The rain continued to pound above them, relentless and indifferent. When they reached the lit junction, Hannah stopped. She looked at Caleb, really looked at him this time. "You're not just an inspector," she said. "No," Caleb replied. She nodded again, accepting the boundary. "Thank you," she said. Not softly. Clearly. Caleb inclined his head. "Go home." She did. Caleb remained in the tunnel long enough to ensure the path stayed clear. Then he turned back toward Shaft 13, the sealed door now exposed, its secrets no longer completely hidden. The line had been crossed, not recklessly, not fully, but enough. Iron stood at his side, rainwater dripping from his coat, eyes bright in the dim light. The mine held its breath. So did Caleb. Dawn broke sharp and colorless over Black Hollow. Fog lay low across the yard, flattening sound, swallowing distance. Then the engines came. Not loud, not rushed. Black vehicles rolled in from both access roads, tires cutting clean lines through wet gravel. Gates were sealed, radios whispered. The mine, which had always decided its own rules, was forced to pause. Caleb Turner stood near the lower access corridor as the first agents moved past him. His posture was different now, no longer bent to blend in. The jacket was the same, the boots were the same. The man inside them was not. Iron stood tight at his side, rain beating on his coat, muscles set, eyes locked forward. The waiting had ended. The dog knew it before anyone spoke. Sarah Whitcomb stepped out of the office, clutching a folder she had not meant to bring with her. She looked taller in the open yard, thinner too, her face pale but composed. Years of keeping her head down showed in the stillness of her hands. She had spent the night pulling reports she was never meant to see side by side. When the lead vehicle stopped and a woman stepped out with a badge already raised, Sarah exhaled slowly. Relief came first. Fear followed close behind. The woman moved fast. Rebecca Miles, early 40s, lean, short dark hair plastered flat by rain. Her eyes swept the yard once and missed nothing. She spoke briefly, clearly, and the response was immediate. Agents spread out, equipment locked down. Cranes froze mid-lift. The mine went quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like a held breath stretched too long. Hannah Brooks reached the perimeter as the last gate shut. She had come straight from home, jacket pulled tight, hair loose from a rushed knot. She looked tired in the hard light, eyes shadowed by a night without sleep. The memory of Shaft 13 clung to her, sharp and unresolved. She stopped when she saw the vehicles, the controlled movement, the sudden authority imposed on a place that had never answered to it. "What's going on?" she asked a guard she barely recognized. "Federal operation," he said. "Please step back." Federal. The word landed heavy. Across the yard, Thomas Reed emerged from the office, irritation etched deep into his face. He wore his clean jacket like a shield, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted. He took in the scene in seconds, the vehicles, the agents, the woman with the badge. "This is a mistake," Reed said loudly. "You can't just—" Rebecca met his gaze and cut him off. "We can, and we are." She held the warrant up long enough to be seen. "Remain where you are." Reed scoffed but stayed still. His eyes kept moving. Hannah's gaze found Caleb without conscious effort. He was walking toward the center of the yard, toward Reed, toward the agents converging on the sealed entrances. He wasn't avoiding attention now. He wasn't hiding. Each step was deliberate, controlled, final. Reed noticed him and stiffened. "You!" he snapped. "What are you doing?" Caleb stopped a few feet away. Up close, his face looked harder, stripped of the smallness he had worn for months. His eyes were steady, unafraid. "My job." Rebecca turned slightly. "Mr. Turner," she said, "we're set." Hannah felt the shift then, not fear, understanding. Mr. Turner. The way Rebecca said it changed everything. Agents moved fast. Locks were cut. Panels removed. Doors that had not been opened in years were forced wide. The mine resisted for seconds, then gave in. Below ground, iron lead. The German shepherd moved ahead of the team with quiet precision, nails scraping lightly against stone, body low and sure. He stopped at the false wall near shaft 13, ears forward, breath steady. The smell was strong here. Oil, metal, old sweat. An agent nodded once and placed charges. The wall collapsed inward with a dull crack, dust billowing like a confession finally exhaled. The chamber beyond was wide and clean in a way coal tunnels never were. Crates stacked in clean rows, weapons sealed tight, cash bundled thick, documents protected against moisture. Cameras flashed, evidence tags snapped into place. The mine's long silence broke under the weight of truth. The man from shaft 13 appeared at the far end, the same lean figure, composure gone now. He ran, iron launched without sound. He closed the distance in seconds, striking low and hard, taking the man's legs out from under him. The dog pinned him, teeth bared just enough. The man froze. Agents were on him immediately, cuffs closing with finality. Iron stepped back on command, eyes never leaving the threat until it was gone. Above ground, crates emerged into the gray light. Reed watched his control unravel piece by piece. Color drained from his face. "You don't understand," he said tightly. "This mine." Caleb stepped closer. "You used it." Agents took Reed by the arms. The cuffs clicked shut. For the first time, he looked small, exposed. He found Caleb's eyes one last time, bitterness sharp and raw. "You think this ends with me?" Caleb's voice was quiet. "It ends here." The yard erupted into motion. Workers whispered. Phones came out. Stories formed instantly. Hannah stood at the edge of it all, hands shaking now that there was room for them to shake. Caleb found her moments later. Up close, he looked exhausted, the kind of tired that lived beneath the skin. "You knew," she said, not accusing, just naming it. "You were watching the whole time." "Yes." "You let me go down there." "I followed you," he said. "I was there. I couldn't stop it sooner without losing everything." She looked away, breath tight in her chest. Gratitude tangled with fear. Hurt pressed in close behind. She didn't argue. She didn't forgive. Not yet. Rebecca approached, her tone softer now. "Miss Brooks, you're safe. We'll need your statement later. For now, "You're clear to go." Hannah nodded and stepped back, creating space the only way she knew how. Caleb watched her leave, accepting the distance as part of the cost. As the fog thinned, the mine stood exposed, its hidden paths laid bare. Iron returned to Caleb's side, wet coat brushing his leg, eyes bright and steady. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's head, grounding himself as the operation moved toward completion. The mine closed quietly. There was no ceremony, no speeches, no ribbon cut to mark the end of something that had shaped Black Hollow for generations. The gates were locked one morning and stayed that way. Signs went up. Trucks stopped coming. The hum that had lived beneath the town for decades faded until people noticed the absence more than the sound itself. Coal dust still clung to buildings and fences, but it no longer thickened with every passing day. Caleb Turner stayed. He could have left within 48 hours. The offer was clear, delivered without sentiment. A renewal, another assignment, another place where waiting would matter more than speaking. Caleb declined with the same economy he brought to everything else. No argument, no justification, just a decision that had taken months to form. The meeting happened in the early evening, rain finally gone, the hills washed clean and green again. Rebecca Miles stood beside her car at the edge of town, posture straight, expression professional, but not unkind. She listened as Caleb spoke, nodded once when he finished. "You did exceptional work," she said. "There's always room for someone like you." "I know," Caleb replied. "I'm done disappearing." She held his gaze for a moment, then extended her hand. "Take care of this place." "I will." Iron lay nearby, stretched out on the gravel, head on his paws, eyes half closed in the warmth of the sun. For the first time since Black Hollow had entered his world, he slept deeply, unburdened by the need to listen for danger. The mine's closure rippled outward slowly. At first there was anger, fear, meetings in the community hall where voices rose and fell without resolution. Generations had depended on the mine. Closing it felt like erasing the town's purpose. Then something else began to happen. Contractors arrived. Environmental crews sealed shafts properly, not hastily. Roads were repaired. Small grants surfaced. It was not enough to fix everything. It was enough to begin. Caleb rented a narrow building near the edge of the yard, close enough to smell coal when the wind shifted, far enough to feel the light. The sign he put up was plain, hand-painted, nothing that promised more than it could deliver. Safety inspection and compliance. Honest work. He furnished the office with a battered desk, filing cabinets salvaged from the mine, and a pot of coffee that never seemed to empty. The first people through the door were the ones who had nowhere else to go. Men with scarred hands and damaged lungs. Women who had worked records and routes, never names. Caleb hired them carefully, not out of pity, but because they knew what shortcuts looked like and where they led. He paid fair wages. He listened more than he spoke. When reports came in incomplete, he sent them back without raising his voice. Word spread. Hannah Brooks did not come immediately. She stayed home with her father while the town adjusted. His health stabilized once the constant strain eased, once medication came without fear of interruption. Hannah slept late for the first time in years, then not at all. She replayed moments from the mine in her mind, testing them for truth. The kindness, the distance, the night in Shaft 13. Understanding did not erase hurt. It only gave it shape. Caleb did not press. He sent one message. "I'm here when you're ready, nothing more." Weeks passed. When Hannah finally stepped into the office, the sunlight caught in her hair, lighter now that dust no longer settled into it daily. She stood uncertainly in the doorway, posture straighter, eyes clearer. She wore clean jeans and a simple shirt that fit properly, not something chosen for survival. The gentleness was still there. So was something new, resolve. "I heard you're hiring," she said. Caleb rose slowly, careful not to crowd her. "I am." "I don't want charity," she added. "I can work." "I know," he said. "I wouldn't offer it otherwise." She exhaled, a breath she had been holding longer than she realized. "Then I'd like the job." Hannah proved indispensable within days. She understood routes and records, schedules and people. More importantly, she understood how to speak without apologizing. She listened when workers complained, translated concerns into clear reports, and pushed back when contractors tried to rush. The town noticed the change in her. Confidence settled into her posture the way fear once had. She no longer lowered her eyes. Sarah Whitcomb transferred her meticulous habits to the new operation without being asked. She brought binders, notes, memories of what paperwork hid and what it revealed. Years ago, fear had taught her to comply. Now, experience taught her to document. She worked with Hannah closely, the two women forming a quiet axis of accountability. Iron claimed a spot near the office door. He lay there most days, stretched out in the sun, greeting visitors with a slow lift of his head and an assessing look. His scarred ear twitched at loud noises, but he no longer rose at every shadow. Children began to approach him cautiously, then with confidence. Iron accepted their hands with solemn patience, tail thumping once in acknowledgment. One evening, after the last truck had left and the office fell quiet, Hannah lingered. "Why here?" she asked, leaning against the desk. "You could have gone anywhere." Caleb considered the question. "Because this place taught me what happens when people are told they don't matter." She nodded slowly. "You still owe me the truth." He met her gaze. "All of it." So he told her. Not the classified details, not the names that could not be spoken, but the truth of who he had been, the waiting, the silence, the choices that had hardened him, and the ones that had nearly broken him. He spoke without drama, without excuse. When he finished, Hannah said quietly, "You should have trusted me." "I know," Caleb replied. "I didn't trust myself not to lose focus." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You did lose focus, just not in the way you expected." They did not rush what followed. They shared coffee in the mornings, walked the perimeter together in the evenings. Some days they talked about the future. Some days they didn't talk at all. What grew between them was steady, built on truth finally spoken. Months later, the mine entrance stood sealed and quiet. Grass pushed through cracks in the concrete. The hills breathed easier. Caleb and Hannah walked along the old access road as the sun dipped low, turning the dust that remained into gold rather than black. Iron lay near the gate, stretched out, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in an easy rhythm. "Do you miss it?" Hannah asked. Caleb thought for a moment. "I miss knowing exactly what I was supposed to do," he said. "I don't miss who I had to be to do it." She smiled. "I used to think surviving was enough. And now? Now I want more." "So do I." They stood there as the light faded, not beneath anyone's feet, not unseen. The coal was still black, the history still heavy. But the people had stepped into the light, and that was enough to change everything. Sometimes God does not stop the darkness right away. Sometimes He allows it to exist so that truth can grow strong enough to survive the light. In this story, the coal was always black. The tunnels were always dangerous. The injustice was always there. But God was not absent. He was preparing people. He was shaping patience, courage, and quiet integrity in places no one was looking. Caleb did not change the mind by force alone. He changed it by choosing to stand firm when it would have been easier to walk away. Hannah did not become strong overnight. She became strong by enduring, by showing up again and again, even when the world treated her as invisible. And in the end, the light came not because evil disappeared on its own, but because truth was ready to be revealed. In our daily lives, we all walk through places that feel dark, workplaces where honesty costs something, homes where worry weighs heavy, moments when doing the right thing feels lonely and unseen. This story reminds us that God sees what others overlook. Every act of kindness matters. Every choice to stand for truth is counted, even when no one applauds. If you are walking through a hard season, do not lose heart. What feels like silence may be preparation. What feels like delay may be protection. God is still working, even under the weight of the darkest dust. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to remind others they are not alone. Subscribe to this channel so more stories of faith, courage, and quiet miracles can reach those who need them. And if you believe that God still brings light into dark places, type Amen in the comments. May God bless you, protect you, and walk with you through every tunnel until you reach the light.